Hey everybody, welcome. Today I'm going to be going into the 15 best high protein foods that will help you to burn fat faster, but also talking about the foods that, rather the high protein foods that really don't support your goals and are ones that you're going to want to avoid. So this is a really important live stream to review and to listen to if you are looking to increase your protein, but you want to make sure that you're actually supporting your body fat loss goals and overall wellness goals. So I'm going to be going over all of that with food lists, intakes, live stream, not video. I also just got a new mic. So if you guys hear anything that sounds off, just let me know in the chat and I'll try and adjust it as I go. Not super tech savvy, but hopefully I'll be able to adjust it as we go on, but hopefully no issues. All right. If you guys are new here, my name's Autumn. I'm a certified clinical nutritionist with my master's nutrition human performance. And we're actually in week 3 of the summer challenge right now. So during our challenges, like our summer one going on right now, which is 6 weeks long, I have these weekly live streams so that we can touch base and go over more in depth the different strategies that we're focusing on during the challenges so that you can just receive more support and be able to up your knowledge and just feel more confident throughout your wellness journey as well. And during this challenge, we're focused on body recomposition. We're focused on tapping into fat burning and maintaining muscle mass, but we're also focused on making sure that we're eating the right types of foods to support a long-term wellness goal and overall just feeling great in the process too. Because really, what is the point of losing body fat if at the same time you have low energy, your hair's falling out, you're just not as healthy? Because it is totally possible to lose body fat and not be healthy. So we want to focus on making sure this is what this challenge is all about, making sure that we're actually supporting our body while also supporting a fat loss goal and maintaining muscle mass. And that's what this whole meal plan is about too. So if you guys want to check it out, it dives really deep into all of that. It is a limited release meal plan. It's what we're following right now, and it's only available throughout the challenge. Once you own it for life. So if you want to grab it, then it's linked down description below. Like every new meal plan I come out with, I also have brand new recipes in there. They're so delicious. There's over 50 in this one. So many delicious ones, like the gummy bears. If you guys haven't tried that one, so good. But the lentil bruschetta bowl, which is bottom middle-ish in that picture, it's right here. This is my personal favorite. So tasty, sneakily tasty. You wouldn't expect it with how few ingredients it has, but it's so good. But anyway, so it is a limited release meal plan. If you want to grab it, it's linked down description below. You can check that out. Okay, now let's dive into today's live stream, which is all about high protein foods that are going to support your goals, but also making sure that you're avoiding those that won't support your goals. But before we even talk about that, we need to know what the benefits of eating more protein really is. Why is it that we want to eat more protein? And what beyond just feeling satisfied, what are the benefits? So when we eat more protein, one of the main benefits that comes from that is that it does help to protect our muscle and it helps to protect our bones too. Protein makes up literally everything in our entire body. It's the amino acids that make up protein, make up so much of our body. It helps to make up our immune cells, obviously our muscle, obviously our bones. So we need to make sure that we're eating enough of it to support our body constantly just rebuilding itself. We're always in a process of breaking down and rebuilding. So our immune cells, our skin cells, our liver cells, literally every single cell within your body is always, our bone cells are always in a process of breaking down and then rebuilding. And it's the ability to maintain the rebuilding phase that will help to determine if we're going to be either losing muscle while losing fat, or if we're going to be destroying our metabolism in the process from a body recomposition perspective. So we want to make sure we're eating enough to support all these bodily functions, which is why when we eat enough protein, it helps to maintain our metabolism while losing weight. And it also can help us to burn more fat compared to muscle because it's helping us to maintain muscle while specifically pulling that energy from body fat rather than pulling it from muscle as well. And just from a purely nice thing to experience, it also helps us to not feel so hungry. That is one thing that is obviously so not fun when people first start a weight loss journey, is that they feel hungry. But that doesn't have to be the case when you're actually eating enough protein. It helps to stimulate satiety hormones that make us feel full, make us feel satisfied so that you don't feel hungry. And along with that is also preventing sugar cravings, because when we're feeling really hungry, our body's looking for a really fast source of energy to help us just instantly get a hit of something to not feel so hungry. And that is usually in the form of sugar or like starchy cravings. And of course, that is not going to be so supportive of a fat loss or a wellness goal. So by eating more protein, by eating enough of the right types of protein for our body, it can help with all of these different aspects. And then just some other studied benefits that maybe you aren't as aware of can help to improve our mood, especially because we can have more stable blood sugar levels when we are eating more protein. And when we get those blood sugar crashes is when we just can get a little hangry and not so fun to be around. And then possibly improve mental health. This one really comes down to if you are eating the right types of protein. So protein, as you guys know from this year's limited release meal plan, it's actually where we get the vast majority of our micronutrients from when you're eating the right types of protein. So if you are eating those nutrient dense sources of protein, like the ones that I talked about in the program or the ones that we're going to be going over in today's live stream, they are so nutrient dense in the things that help to support a healthy brain and have actually been found to possibly help with anxiety as well. I personally have experienced this. You guys know that I have my history, very extensive history of pretty severe anxiety growing up, well through college and then into my early adulthood. It was pretty severe. And when I started to eat more of these higher quality proteins that naturally were rich in these micronutrients that supported brain health too, my anxiety, my day-to-day anxiety drastically reduced. Improved skin, better recovery, all of these all have to do with our body's need for these amino acids that come from protein because we're constantly in that breaking down and rebuilding stage. Same thing with our skin, which is why people tend to notice that their skin can see some improvements when they're eating more quality protein. Okay, so that's just like the plethora of benefits. I've talked so much about all these different benefits. So I didn't want to go like too deep into that. But let's go next into the high protein foods to avoid. Before we go into like the 15 best ones, I want to talk about the ones that are like a little sketch. Maybe you don't want to be focusing on these because these are highly processed, they're ultra processed, and they're typically just devoid or void of any type of quality micronutrients like vitamin B12, calcium, iron, zinc, all of these things that we need for our immune system, for general health, for our mental health, for our brain health. All of these high protein foods on this list right here are going to be pretty micronutrient poor and be so ultra processed that they're not as supportive of a fat loss or of a long-term health goal. So this includes things like plant-based processed meats. So like the Beyond Meat style meats, not the same thing as like tempeh, which is different. We'll talk about that later on in this live stream, but the really, really processed plant-based meats like Beyond Meat or those that are made out of just like pea protein powder and that's it. And that's the only protein source I was really getting from those foods. Those are ones that are not going to be very micronutrient dense and have some other issues that I've talked about in the past too, but not great for body recomp or long-term wellness. Cook the protein cookies, the protein cereals, which I've been getting so many ads delivered to me lately on like the different protein cereals. I'm not going to name names, but like you guys probably know which ones I'm talking about. Protein bars, meal replacement drinks, like the ready to drink meal replacement ones. Like the first one that comes to my mind is like Slim Fast, or the protein chips, which are starting to really like surface lately. Pretty much all of these just ultra processed forms of foods where they're just like adding protein into it in the form of usually like soy protein or like pea protein. Even if they are using whey protein, these are still the other ingredients that they're using with it are really ultra processed, like the oils that they're using, the sugars that they're adding in. It's just not a nutrient dense source of food. So even if it does have some protein in there, it's likely not super supportive of a long-term health and wellness goal. Okay. Versus there are some that are kind of like in between. I call these like high protein foods or high protein foods to reconsider. Ones that you might have heard of as being high in protein. And so maybe you think like, oh, I'm just going to add these into my meal because it's going to help to boost my protein intake. But these actually aren't as great of protein sources as you may have thought. And it really breaks down into three categories. The first is one that I call carb proteins. And these are primarily carbohydrate sources with a little bit of protein in there, or maybe it has more than a little bit of protein, but it's mostly a carbohydrate source. And these are things like grains, or quinoa is a really popular one that people talk about as being like high in protein. And then beans. So beans, that's like comes with a little asterisk. Can never say that word. We'll talk about that in just a second because there is like a different scenario where that could be used as a protein, but especially like the grains and quinoa, those are not super high in protein compared to the carbohydrate count. You'd have to eat so much of these grains and quinoa in order to get anywhere close to the amount of protein that you need, that the amount of carbohydrate would vastly outweigh the actual amount of protein that you're getting. So it could cause a really big blood sugar spike. It can make it just so that you have to eat so much food in order to actually eat enough protein to support your goals. And then the protein that are within those, there's not very high quality. So they are poor quality. They're low dias. They aren't absorbed as well. And so it's not something that's going to be as supportive of a long-term body recomposition goal. And then there's ones I call like the fat proteins. These are the opposite of the carb protein. So they also have a little bit of protein, but it's mostly fat that they're going to be packaged with. So this is things like peanut butter or almond butter, or really just any type of nuts and seeds. Now, I'm saying this not to say that you shouldn't have these foods, but to view them not necessarily as a protein, but as a fat. Same thing with the carbohydrates I mentioned earlier. Like if you are going to have quinoa, view it as a starch or a carbohydrate and not necessarily as a protein source, because that's not really the value that it's providing. So with the fat options, same thing with like peanut butter, almond butter, nuts, and seeds. It not only is so low in protein, but the quality of the protein that is in there is so poor that it's not going to be used properly as protein within your body. Okay, and then the high fat protein. So this is kind of similar to the fat proteins, except these are proteins that are high quality proteins. They do actually have good quality protein within it, but they are so much higher in fat that you would also have to eat so much fat in order to get the amount of protein that you need, that it's really imbalanced. So it's not that you can't have these, but these are ones that maybe eat more on the occasion or paired with other sources of proteins like the one I'm going to be talking about in just a second. So things like bacon, sausage, salami, or whole milk, kefir, most cheeses. So you guys know I just did a video recently about kefir and all the benefits of kefir. Same thing with whole milk. There's a lot of benefits and they're very, very nutrient dense, but the amount of protein in it isn't like super high. So if you were to try in one meal to get all of your protein from whole milk, for example, you would have to have, quick math, like 5 cups of milk in one sitting. That's a lot of milk in order to get like roughly 30, 40 grams of protein. And so you're going to be getting a lot more, especially in milk's example, a lot more of like both carbs and fats than you would of the actual protein amount. So same thing with kefir, same thing with most cheeses. So using these in conjunction with another higher quality protein, like the ones we're going to talk about in just a second, is a better way to approach these high fat proteins. All right. So, I did mention like the asterisks on the beans. This is where if you are vegan, if you are vegetarian, then there are ways to still use something like beans or some other plant-based proteins and be able to get higher protein amounts and without sacrificing your goals. But you do have to be very, very specific with how you go about it to make sure that you're not only getting the protein, but also getting the micronutrients. I have a couple pages specifically dedicated to these strategies, very, very in-depth strategies on what you can do on pages 24 and 25 in the latest 6-week summer meal plan. So please make sure you check those out if you are plant-based or if you are vegetarian, so that you have a better understanding of how to combine these different foods and what you might need to look out for. Okay. So then we talked a lot about like poor quality proteins, but I want to also just give a broader understanding of what makes a protein good. Like, why is one protein actually going to be great for these goals we're talking about, for body fat loss, for body recomposition, for fat loss, but also for long-term health and wellness, and why it might not be as good, even though it does have protein. So there's really 3 main factors. The first one is that it is high in protein compared to the other macronutrients. This seems kind of obvious. Like if you're looking to increase your protein, then you should be looking for the foods, or increasing the foods rather, and incorporating the foods that are really high in protein. But that phrase has really gotten mixed up, I feel like, with the rise and increase like interest in eating more protein, where almost all foods can be considered high protein because almost all foods contain some type of protein. So you want to find foods that are actually truly high in protein compared to the fat and the carbohydrate amount. And it's not like you have to be tracking everything to figure this out. You just have to get an understanding of what these look like, which is what we're going to be talking about throughout this live stream. And then high diaz. So this is just one way in like research that scientists will measure the quality of the protein. So when they're measuring the quality of the protein, they're checking to see, is it actually being digested and absorbed and used in the body as protein? If it's not, then you're not going to be getting the benefits that you're looking for. You're not going to be getting the body recomposition benefits. You're not going to be getting the satiety benefits, or possibly any of the other benefits of actually using protein, because you're not actually getting it. So high diaz are ones that are really digestible. You're actually getting and using that protein as a protein. The low diaz are ones that are not digestible and you're not really using the protein as protein. An example of this would be like peanut butter. Peanut butter has protein in it, and you've probably heard that peanut butter is like a high protein food, but it's a very poor quality protein where you're not actually using the protein as a protein, versus something like ground beef in this example, which there are plant-based and vegetarian good quality proteins, but just to give an example, ground beef is a very high quality protein. You're actually using the vast majority of that protein as a protein, so you're getting the benefits when you're eating it. So we want to make sure that we're getting not only high protein foods, but also those that are actually absorbed as protein. And then really this is seen as like a bonus, but it's very important, is to make sure that those proteins are also nutrient dense. So you can have something that's high in protein, high in diet, or high diet, high absorbed, it's very absorbed very well, but it could be very nutrient poor. And we'll be talking about some examples of that in just a second too. But we want to make sure that they also have the nutrients that will support the long-term health and wellness, like the benefits of the improved mental health, but also like having iron, having calcium, having vitamin A and B12. These are things we need on a daily basis. Like vitamin B12, we need to make sure that we're not low in. Otherwise, if we're consistently low in vitamin B12, it can actually result in permanent nerve damage. I have had a client before who has had permanent nerve damage from not having enough vitamin B12. It does take time to build that up. And, if you're eating animal-based foods, it's pretty hard. It's essentially impossible to get vitamin B12 deficiency, but it can happen. And I have experienced that from clients, where they did get a permanent nerve damage issue because of that. So these are serious things. You want to make sure that you're also getting the micronutrients, not just the protein itself. Okay, so let's get into the list. So these are the 15 foods that are going to follow these different guidelines. The first one is beef. I feel like this is just like kind of the obvious one that we talk a lot about on my channel, but there are others. So again, if there's one on here that you don't love, you don't necessarily have to have that. There's a lot of others on this list. But beef is the one that we have the most in my household because it is so nutrient dense. It is so versatile because you can have something like steak, or you could have ground beef or ground sirloin, and you could make meatballs. You could make bolognese. Like there's so many different things that you can make with it. And especially something like ground beef, it's a less expensive option compared to maybe like a steak. So I have a bonus on here, like bonus, you can add in ground organ meats in there if you want to really ramp up the nutrient density. That's not necessarily for everyone. I personally am not a big organ meat fan because it gives me the ick. I don't love it. I wish I did because it is so nutrient dense. But there are actually companies where they will like pre-grind like kidney and heart and liver into ground beef. So you don't even have to see it. You don't have to touch it, and it's already ground in there. I don't know any brands off the top of my head. I've just seen it at the grocery store, at my local health food store before. I've tried it and it does work out. So if you wanted to do that to help ramp up your nutrient density of your beef even further, it's a great option too. Okay, the next one is lamb. So this one can be more fatty depending on the cut that you're using. So the ones that you're going to want to look out for are lamb loin and lamb shank. You can use something like ground lamb, and it is a great option, but it does tend to have a higher amount of fat, kind of like almost like sausage meat. So you can use that, but just know that you probably don't want to add in other sources of fat because it already is pretty rich in fats. And lamb is very nutrient dense. Okay, and then for my plant-based folks, so tempeh. Tempeh is a fermented soybean product, and I prefer using tempeh if you're going to have some type of soy versus just like tofu, because first of all, tempeh is a lot more dense. So you only have to eat about 5 ounces of tempeh in order to get 30 grams worth of protein versus like um, even a hard or like the really firm tofu, you need to eat about 9 ounces, which is a lot. So those bricks of tofu that you'll see at the grocery store that, they come like little packages of bricks. They're usually about, I think, 14 ounces. So you need to eat, what is that, like 3/4 or 2/3 of that brick at every single meal in order to have 30 grams at every single meal just coming from that protein source. So that's why I like using tempeh. You don't have to have like such a massive amount, and it's fermented, so you remove a lot of those anti-nutrient issues. And I also, if you guys haven't tried tempeh bacon, you can make it too, but you're essentially just like adding on like seasonings to it. It is a very tasty alternative if you are plant based. All right. And if you guys could let me know in the chat, how's the sound? Does it sound okay? This is the first time I'm using this mic. It's like a very fancy mic. I had to have my husband Trevor put it together for me because I am not tech savvy. So let me know if it sounds okay. All right, but moving on for now, Parmesan. So I had mentioned cheese as being one of those that you kind of have to watch out for because typically it's a lot higher in fat than it is in protein. Parmesan is kind of an exception because it does have about 10 grams of protein per ounce. That's a lot of protein per ounce. It's actually more protein per ounce than something like ground beef. So it is really high in protein. So if you wanted to add on, if you wanted to maximize for your protein amount from your cheese, then Parmesan would be the route to go. But still, it's not something that I would say consider your main protein source because it does still have a higher like fat to protein balance. But if you want to add cheese on your meal, Parmesan is a better option, at least from a body composition perspective. Sound is good. Thank you. Okay, great. Okay, so the next one is again for my plant-based folks. So it's nutritional yeast. This is often used as like a cheese alternative in a lot of plant-based recipes, but it's actually surprisingly a high quality protein. Like it is pretty high quality. It's pretty dense in protein. The few studies I've seen on nutritional yeast digestibility have said that it is a pretty easy to digest and absorb protein source. So that's great. You only need about 3 tablespoons of it for 10 grams of protein. So again, pretty dense in protein. It's one of those little hacks that you can do if you are plant-based to help bump up your overall protein intake for the meal. I wouldn't necessarily consider having just nutritional yeast for your main protein, but especially if you are plant-based, you could combine it with other things to help get a full like 30 grams from quality sources. This is also, again, something I mentioned in the meal plan. I think it's on pages 24 and 25. So if you guys haven't grabbed that meal plan yet, it's a limited release summer meal plan. It's linked down description below. All right. And then, so when it comes to dairy, there's various options. I just wanted to give like a category here. So this list actually has more than 15, but the category of dairy is a little specific on which ones are going to be best when you consider it as a main protein source. Because as I mentioned, something like whole milk, that isn't necessarily a great main protein source because it's not balanced well enough with the fats and the carbs where you're going to need to have so much milk in order to get, for example, 30 grams of protein, that it's not really a feasible source of protein. Even though it's a very nutrient dense food, it's not something that should be considered your main source. It can help bump up the protein of the meal, but not necessarily be one that you just want to have as your protein. But there are other dairy products that are pretty dense in protein. So cottage cheese. You guys know I love cottage cheese. It is so dense in protein. You only need about 1 1/4 cup of cottage cheese in order to get about 30 grams of protein. Same thing with whole milk skyr. I underline whole milk skyr because it's a little more rare to find a whole milk skyr. It's usually a low or non-fat type of, technically it's a cheese, but people view it as a yogurt. Um, and so you need to specifically seek out whole milk. Now, this is to make sure that it is very nutrient dense because when you remove the fat portion of like the yogurt, for example, like or in cottage cheese, then it really reduces the amount of vitamin K2. So it makes it more nutrient poor. And vitamin K2 is hard to find outside of fermented dairy products. And it's really important for heart health, bone health, and dental health. If you guys didn't see my video on how I permanently messed up my teeth, make sure you check it out because I talk a lot about vitamin K2 in that one. And it came out like a couple weeks last month. Not really sure. I'm in the newborn phase right now with my 7 week old. So everything's a little bit of a blur, but I think it was like in May that it came out, or maybe early June. Anyway, so Greek yogurt, same thing, whole milk there, and it is very nutrient dense. You only need about 1.5 cup of Greek yogurt to get about 30 grams of protein, depending on the brand. And then I put for halloumi and paneer an asterisk next to those as well, because even though they are great alternatives for vegetarians as like a grillable type of protein that you can use instead of something like chicken, and it is going to have a pretty decently high amount of protein, it's also pretty high in fat. So it's one of those where if you are going to use them, great source, nutrient dense, but you'll want to make sure that you're not adding in additional sources of fat because you already have quite a bit within the halloumi or paneer. And then whey protein powder, really easy way to bump up your protein intake. There's so many study benefits of whey protein powder specifically. It's widely considered the gold standard with nutrition experts, sports nutrition, as well as just general nutrition experts around the world, because it is so high diaz. It's absorbed so easily. We're able to use it as a protein so easily. So adding it into something like this yogurt bowl, for example, that I have pictured right here, combining it with other nutrient dense sources like the Greek yogurt can help to get you to your protein amounts if you're finding that you are falling a bit short. So obviously you guys know I have my protein powder. So you can check that out. Delicious, made to specifically actually be in foods like the pancakes that we make or the cottage cheese or in yogurt bowls. So if you want to check that out, it is on my shop at autumnlnutrition.shop. And I am biased, but I personally developed it to taste amazing. And that is hard to find when it comes to protein powders. All right, next up we have bison. So bison is very similar to like a ground beef or just beef in general. Using steaks or ground bison, you can pretty much use them interchangeably with any type of beef recipe, and it is very high quality. Okay, next up, poultry. So this one is one of those where it's like not as nutrient dense as some of the others on this list, but it is very high in protein. So I just wanted to Okay, yeah. Oops, I thought I changed the page for a second. I just wanted to bring up a chart it is actually from the 6 week summer meal plan. Let me see if I can make it bigger. Can I go like that? Cool. Okay. So this is from my 6 week summer meal plan. And just to give you an idea of what this chart means, you're looking at how much of each of these foods you have to eat in order to hit your 1/3 of your daily nutrient needs. So for example, like if you're looking at the refined grains on the far right here, you can see that it looks like that, like it should, like maybe it might be confusing where it looks like if it's really high up on the chart that it's a very nutrient dense, but it's actually the opposite. So if you have a high bar right here, this means you need to eat a lot of that food in order to actually eat enough or 1/3 of the micronutrients you need in a day. So in order to get 1/3 of your micronutrients that you need in a day from refined grains, you need to eat 4,000 calories. So it's from just to cover one meal. So if you were to just eat refined grains, as an example, for all of your meals, then to cover all of your daily needs, you would need to have 12,000 calories worth of refined grains versus something like, let's look on the bottom end. We have beef or we have eggs. Both of these are very low. Like you don't need to eat that much of beef or eggs or even cheese for that matter, or even a lot of other vegetables. You don't need to eat that much of these in order to cover 1/3 of your daily micronutrient needs. So from a body, and they tend to be so much more satiating, so much more satisfying. So from a body recomposition perspective, it helps your body to burn more fat as fuel because you don't need to eat so much food to feel satisfied, but also you don't need to eat so much food in order to actually get the micronutrients your body needs. Now, I want to point out chicken right here. Compared to something like refined grains, it is still so much more nutrient dense. However, if you look at chicken versus like beef, it's not quite as nutrient dense. See right here, it's at about a little over 1,000 calories you would need to eat to cover 1/3 of your needs from just chicken versus beef. I'm not even sure exactly what that is. Like what, 200 maybe, maybe less. But yeah, you need about 200 calories worth of beef in order to hit 1/3 of your daily needs. So that's where you can see the micronutrient differences on some of these lower ones, and why something like chicken, it's okay to have on the occasion, but it's not something you necessarily want to have at every single one of your meals because it's just harder to get those micronutrients rather from something like chicken. Still much better than refined grains. Okay, moving on. So we have pork. So pork, tenderloin, loin chops, baby back ribs are actually quite leaner options. So you can opt for those too. You do want to watch out for something like bacon, like I mentioned earlier, because it is going to have more of that fat and protein imbalance. But some of these other ones are great options for pork. And then venison, all cuts work there. I've actually never had venison, believe it or not. I have a lot of clients who love venison. Katie, who I don't know if she's on here right now, but Katie has it all the time. All right. And then goat, same thing there. All cuts work. And this is actually a very, very micronutrient dense food. So it's a great option if it's something that's local to you and you're able to get your hands on. This is pretty hard for me to get my hands on. So I think I've only had goat like once or twice in my life. Seafood. So there's a lot of different options for seafood that are very micronutrient dense. So fatty fish, obviously, we hear about those all the time, like salmon, tuna, anchovies, sardines, because they are really rich in omega-3 fats. But the other unsung heroes are things like shrimp and crab and lobsters and oysters and clams. Those are not only going to be rich in protein, but they are really, really nutrient dense. So something like oysters, for example, I have an asterisk there. That is, you could almost view that as like a supplement because it is so micronutrient dense, especially with vitamin B12. It has an absurd amount of vitamin B12. So if you are low in vitamin B12, you could actually almost just take oysters a couple times a week as a supplement because it is so dang rich in vitamin B12. So just wanted to share how you can have like a variety of different seafood. It's not like you're just stuck with having salmon or having tuna. There's so many different options. Like last night, we made shrimp tacos. They were delicious, and they are really, really micronutrient dense and rich in protein. Okay. And then eggs. Eggs are also one of those like multivitamin essentially types of proteins. But it is best to be paired with other proteins. I have a full video where I talk about this on how you like all the different types of pairings that you can have with eggs. And it's because even though eggs are rich in protein, they are very, very micronutrient dense. They aren't very well balanced with the fat. So, in order to get about 30 grams of protein, you need to eat roughly 5 to 6 eggs at one meal. That is a lot of eggs to eat at one meal. Most people I know don't want to eat 5 to 6 eggs in one sitting. So that's where you can pair it with other more dense sources or complement it with other sources. So I like to scramble eggs with cottage cheese. So you mix it into the eggs before you actually cook them. And it actually makes them taste really cheesy and fluffy. And that helps to significantly bump up the protein. But you could also add something like ground meat to it as well if you want to help bump up the protein further. Okay, and then organ meats, as I said, if you like organ meats, more power to you. I wish I grew up having them because they are so micronutrient dense. I just can't. I've tried. I will try again. But liver, heart, kidney, these are great options to not only get the protein and but also the micronutrients as well. In fact, liver is so micronutrient dense that it's typically recommended to only have like 3 to 4 ounces once a week because it is so micronutrient dense. And as I mentioned earlier, you can actually find a lot of brands where they or companies where they pre-grind it into their like regular ground meat. I would just check out your local health food store, usually like the pre-packaged meats, or you could do it yourself. You could grind up something like some liver and put it into the ground meat as well. But if you're like maybe more squeamish about it, like I am, getting the pre-ground option so you don't see it going in could be helpful. Okay. And then I wanted to list some borderline options. These are ones where technically they are like very nutrient dense. They have a lot of those micronutrients. They do have some protein and they are going to be higher in carbs compared to these other items that I listed earlier, but they are borderline higher dias, so more digestible options, especially if you are plant-based. Or if you just want to switch it up a little bit and balance out, maybe like not just have chicken in a meal, but have some other type of protein along there too. So those include things like chickpeas, mung beans, peas, lentils, and black-eyed peas. And if you guys have read through the limited release 6-week summer meal plan, you will know that these are also considered like the honorable mentions from studies showing like what the most nutrient dense foods are in the world. These also are really high in fiber too. So it's a great way to get some other more of those like team player nutrients in there also. Okay. So if you guys, I'm going to answer some questions, but if you guys missed it yet, or haven't seen it yet, we do have the 6-week summer meal plan. It's limited release. It's our 2025 edition, brand new information, brand new recipes. They're so delicious, and use a lot of these micronutrient dense foods and teach you how to use these foods as well, or like when the types of foods that you would want to look out for that are micronutrient dense and rich in protein. So if you guys want to check that out, it is linked down description below. So many delicious recipes this year. And otherwise, I'm going to go through and answer some questions. If you guys have some questions, put 4 question marks before and after your question. It makes it a lot easier for me to find it. Um, Okay, so Elaine, I think you're saying I haven't found many grass-fed Greek yogurts in South Carolina. Would whole milk Faya yogurt or all these organic Greek whole milk yogurt be okay? Yeah, so the number one thing is that I would look out for is just making sure that it is full fat. That's in my opinion, like the hierarchy, that's the most important thing because that's going to have the micronutrients in there that your body needs to. I'd rather a full fat Greek yogurt that's not grass fed than a grass fed low fat option, just as a general rule of thumb. So you can get the benefits of the protein, but also the micronutrients too. If you can find both, great. Mm. Oh, thank you, Camille. The best protein powder for making protein waffles and pancakes, Autumns. Thank you. I agree. I was actually thinking of making like my protein waffles for lunch just because it sounds so good right now. Okay, what about flavored Greek yogurt, or do you recommend only plain? I recommend plain. You can add flavors in. So this is where you could do something like I have the like raspberry compote recipe in the 6-week summer meal plan that will help to give you control over the flavor that you're adding in without adding in added sugars. So it just gives you more control over the sugar type and quality and quantity that you're putting in. My issue with the flavored Greek yogurts is that they're just going to either be adding in a lot of sweetener, or it's not really a sweetener that you want to be using. So it might be like high fructose corn syrup, or it might be like just straight up cane sugar, something that's going to be more high glycemic load, versus like you could get that same sugar and other additional benefits like fiber from something like the raspberry compote. So opting for, if you don't love the flavor of like Greek yogurt, opting for the unflavored and then adding in like the raspberry compote, or a good little hack is putting in like a scoop of my vanilla protein powder, which is 0 added sugar in there, and it bumps up your protein and it makes it taste like vanilla yogurt. That's a great little hack you could do instead of having just straight up flavored sweetened yogurt. Oh, that's great. Brienne, my natural grocers thankfully stocks whole milk skyr. Yeah, I've only ever seen, I think like one brand. I think it's Siggy's that usually has it. So it's a good one to look out for if you're looking for skyr. Uh, oh, great. Sounds like the sound worked for everybody. Fantastic. Okay, chopped liver seasoned correctly is yummy. Can you make it for me? Come over, make it for me. I'd love to test it out. I'm always willing to try something, but I've had it so many times and I can't so far, but I would love to love it. Please help me love it. Okay, would plain white rice be considered a bad card? I don't use the terms like bad or good. It's just high, medium, or low glycemic load, because there are reasons why you might want to use something that is high glycemic load, like white rice. So you want to, it's not necessarily categorizing as good or bad. It's just knowing the time to use it and when it's going to support your goals. For example, if you are insulin resistant, if you have type 2 diabetes, having something that's so high glycemic load, so blood sugar spiking, like white rice, is not going to be supportive of your goals. Versus if you are really, really active, you're already having a lot of difficulty eating enough food as it is to support your body's activity level and muscle recovery. So especially if you're really focused on high intensity interval training, having something like white rice could be really beneficial for you at that time. And in fact, just having low glycemic load carbs that are really, really blood sugar stabilizing isn't necessarily a good thing to do if you are at that level of activity because it won't support your athletic goals. So that's where you just need to know what your goals are and how each of these foods impact those goals. That's something I talk about so much in my body composition program. So if you want to check that out, it's in the beginner bundle for this year's like beginner bundle that also includes our 6-week summer meal plan, or you can find it on its own. It's just called the Body Recomposition Program. You can find it on my shop at autumnlnutrition.shop. So autumn, ELLE, nutrition.shop. Mm. Oh, awesome. Brienne, my husband and I had the black and bold mango salsa last night. That was the winner. He loved it. Awesome. Yeah, I specifically make sure that all of my recipes are things that are simple, they're easy to put together, they're nutrient dense, they're going to have that good balance of protein, but also are foods that the family will love. So I always test everything by my husband and now by my toddler to make sure that it's kid and family approved. Karen has a good point here. So Karen said bad carbs are processed foods, carbs and vegetables are good carbs. You could almost view it like that. So generally speaking, ultra processed, because there is a difference between like processed and ultra processed. Ultra processed carbohydrates are the ones that there's kind of like no use case for those for the most part, unless it's something like you are in the hospital and you have to like be tube fed, for example. You can only have ultra processed carbs, ultra processed proteins, ultra processed fats because it needs to be fed to you via a tube. That is a use case that would actually be like why those types of foods are beneficial. But generally speaking, ultra processed carbs, there's not really like a beneficial use case for them. So if we're going to say a good and bad, that's the one type of differentiation you could have. Okay, Isabel in UK. Which magnesium should I be taking? I swim 5 times a week, walk daily, do weights 3 times a week, and hit 2 times per week. Wow, very, very active. I would first of all, make sure that you're getting all the nutrients your body needs. So making sure you're getting enough protein. Also, checking out, like I talked about, the like use case for maybe having some medium or even some high glycemic load carbs, because all that is very important for muscle recovery, and electrolytes. All that to the side. Magnesium, to actually answer your question, it kind of depends. So I'm like in my own journey of testing out different magnesiums. I've been using the same one for so many years. It's always worked well for me. It's just the Life Extension brand. There are like more expensive, more absorbable ones. The most absorbable one is magnesium L-threonate, and it is significantly more expensive. So I'm actually going to be testing that out soon to see if it really is worth the extra amount that you'd pay, because it is so much more expensive. And I'll get back to you guys on that because I'm not convinced yet, but I want to test out myself first and see if it really is that much better. But I do have a video as well if you search Autumn Bates Magnesium, where I talk about what to look out for that. And I have a couple brands I recommend in there too. Okay, I'm going to answer like one or two more questions. Mary, really great, great question. Are all whey protein powders created equal? Absolutely not. So there's different things to look out for when it comes to whey proteins. First of all, is the type of whey that they're using. So we only use 100% whey protein isolate. This means that it is the highest amount of protein and the lowest amount of lactose. There's other forms of whey protein that have a lot less protein. And if you see like whey protein concentrate, that's the one that is a lot lower in protein and it can have a big range. I believe the lowest end it could be is only like 35%, and up to 80% of the actual weight is going to be whey protein. And the other could be like lactose, for example. So it could be pretty high lactose, which is why, from my experience, I've seen people who previously didn't do well with the whey protein like powder, like they would get bloating or gas or just didn't feel good for their belly. When they have something that's 100% whey protein isolate, like our protein powder, they're actually able to tolerate it because it is so much lower in lactose. So there's the whey protein isolate, there's whey protein concentrate, and then there's milk protein concentrate. You don't see that as often. But what you will often see as well, if somebody will advertise that they do use whey protein isolate, like on the front, they'll also oftentimes cut it or mix it with this milk or with this whey protein concentrate, which is a lot lower in protein, a lot higher in lactose, to make it so it's a lot cheaper for them to produce. But then people can still get the GI issues because it has so much more lactose. So they'll put in just enough of the whey protein isolate to make it the majority of the protein. So they can put that as like the first protein on the ingredients label, but then they'll cut it with the cheaper milk protein concentrate that can cause GI upset. Again, that is why we only use 100% whey protein isolate, because it is so well studied as being as having so many benefits. But also I want to make sure that it's like going to do well for my belly personally. So that's what you want to look out for. There's a lot of other factors as well, like the type of sweetener they're using, or if there's any sweetener at all. We only use a naturally zero sugar monk fruit extract. Again, a lot of people also cut their sweeteners, like if they say it has monk fruit, which is often considered like the best natural sweetener or not natural zero added sugar sweetener because it tastes so much better. Or I mean, in my opinion, a lot of people's opinion, but there are some people who do like stevia too. But it'll often then people will cut it with like stevia or erythritol, which is a lot cheaper, but again, has either that like weird aftertaste with stevia, or if something like erythritol, it can cause GI upset because it's a sugar alcohol. So you just want to make sure that you are looking at the ingredients, like all of the ingredients, to see what other like sweeteners or what other proteins they're using in there too, to make sure that it's going to work for you. If whey protein concentrate works for your body, cool. For myself personally, and for a lot of people who are lactose intolerant or who just get bloated from having something that's like high lactose, 100% whey protein isolate is what you want to look for. And it's just denser in protein. You get more protein bang for your buck. Okay. Um, Angie, speaking of the protein powder, I have difficulty accessing your website to purchase your vanilla protein powder. Any suggestions? If you are in the US, you should be able to access it. If not, you can email us at info@automelnutrition.com. But if you aren't in the US, we don't ship internationally. So that might be why you aren't able to access the website, because I think it just doesn't let people internationally like even view the product, but I'm not quite sure. But either way, you can just email us and we can help you out there. Um, okay. Another person trying to make me a liver convert. Liver is delicious. Make sure to soak it in milk. Makes it excellent. I will say I haven't tried that. So I haven't tried everything yet. So maybe I'll give it a go. After this newborn phase, once I get my son sleeping through the night, then I'll tackle that next thing. All right, guys. I hope you guys learned a lot with this live stream, because I wanted to make it really like applicable to just being able to take this information and apply it to your life like right away, right now. So giving you the actual types of foods that you could try today for lunch or today for dinner. But if you guys have not grabbed the Live and Release meal plan that talks all about these body recomposition tools, specifically focusing on the nutrient density and the quality of these foods, make sure you grab it. It's only available during the 6-week summer challenge. Once you own it for life. But after that, it's not on the shop anymore. So you want to make sure you grab that before it's gone. I have it linked down description below. Otherwise, this was really fun using my new mic. It feels like so fancy. I hope the sound improved from last time. And we have another live stream next week on Monday. So a lot of great information on that one too. Make sure you guys tune in. I think it's going to be 1 p.m. PST again as well. But you'll be able to see it once I post it on Thursday. All right, guys, I will see you next time.